Hello and welcome to Get a Grip on Rebates. This is Juan Carlos Blacker. With me, as always, is John Wilson. And as you know, we are brought to you by TCP. That's tcpi.com, the craziest people in lighting. Go check them out. Check out the product. Check out what they have to sell. And if you got questions on rebates, they know all about it. So that's TCP, tcpi.com. John, how are you today?
Man, I'm doing really good. I'm a little hot to trot. I'm fired up because we just talked to our friend Devin Wall, Lubers International. He was just on. We had a great conversation, and we got another guest with us right now, Mr. Michael Colligan, and I am just itching to decompress a little bit, to bounce some ideas off this guy and see what he comes back with, because I have a feeling in ping pong, I'm going to make a ping pong analogy. People don't get the wrong idea. I'm not good at the game. My biggest mistake in ping pong is when somebody actually gives me a slow bouncy. I'm actually mixing my metaphors now because I think I'm going to crush it. And then sometimes what happens? You overswing. That's when you bury it in the net and you're like, consider that where this is going, Michael, because I feel like I'm about to give you a slow bouncy, but I'm curious.
It's an off-speed pitch.
It's an off-speed pitch.
Is what you're talking about.
Yeah, there you go.
Devin just talked to us. We had him on. We were continuing our conversation.
Love Louvers, great nailed member. TCP, yeah. Love
TCP,
LS. Sure.
Keeping it going. Love for the industry.
Yeah.
We were talking about trunk slammers, right? That's
sure.
motif that we got going out here.
Right.
And we're trying to flush out, is this just a weak sauce, two-dimensional caricature that's like the boogeyman? Or is this just a persistent and pernicious problem that is morphing alongside competitive business, right? Like direct to market is taken over. If you talk to Nike, if you look at any of these major industries, direct to market is crushing. You talk to a lot of conventional lighting players, they're like, this direct to market is garbage. They're bypassing the middleman, and they don't got the service model. Now, Devin made a compelling case for all the value he brings to the table.
Mm-hmm.
But are we, first question for you, are we to automatically villainize and say direct to market has no place in the lighting industry when it is taking over and dominating at just about every other major retail channel that's out there for other industries? How does the lighting industry reconcile where it's at with this new trend?
All right, first of all, did you cut your hair? Because I thought you looked way better with the long hair, brother. I don't know if I like that hair. I like the old
springtime out here. I had to get the bob. I like the bob, man.
I like the Lestat kind of Dracula look that you had going in that.
There's also a lot more light. There's more light in this room too. It does feel very different.
You've done something different. Okay, but anyway, so look, I mean, I got nothing but love for the trunk slammers, man. I'll tell you this. A lot of nailed members started that way. The association that I'm a part of, they started off, working their hustling. I think the problem now is that in the old days of the trunk slammers, or people that were out, selling things, the consequences of buying from a trunk slammer were a lot lower. In the age of LED, when the guy's saying that the bulbs are going to last forever and they're never going to burn out, and that the old, like when people are running around selling 60-watt A19s out of their trunks and 50 R20s and fluorescent tubes, fluorescent tube's a fluorescent tube. It lasts a long time, and when it burns out, you order more. And nobody was given
a commodity. Yeah. It's been a commodity product for a long time.
Yeah. And so, if it lasts 2 years or 5 years, that doesn't really change the customer's expectation all that much. Right?
Yeah, but if I can interrupt for a second, It does change the utility's expectation quite a bit.
Yeah, but who brought them in? Who brought them into our business? So I would say that, the utility, when you're incenting things and you're making these things kind of happen, the promise of super long life in lighting was always a scam. It was a scam long before LEDs came along. My dad got fired from commercial lighting in 1976 because when he went into the back of the shop, they were scraping the labels off the tubes and putting long life on them. He's like, I'm selling this stuff in the field. And they're like, yeah, just keep it going. It doesn't matter because this and that. Like the long life scam, if you know anyone that's been in lighting longer than 15 years, long life is a scam. Always was, always will be. So the idea that, trunk slammers are out there selling LED lighting that lasts forever, well, that's right behind all the big guys in lighting. Okay?
Yeah.
Right behind them, actually, that accusation.
I hear you. I like how this is playing out. So far, this is all passing the straight face test, right? So far, so let me ask you this. Let's take it a step further. How do you police the industry? What does janky look like to you? Right? When are you on a job and you're like, hey man, that guy's just selling some cheap product and he's hustling. That's where I came from. He's gonna come up and make his way and more power to him. When is that an acceptable method and they're helping the customer and getting them there and long life's always been a scam? Versus, do you have anything that flips your switch that's like, hold up, you're like punching holes in all of our ship? You're like bringing water into the ship.
Yeah, I mean, for me, I never criticize a competitor. I will never do that. I'll never say that we're better than those guys and they're no good and here's why we're better. I would just say, you know what? That's an interesting proposal. I think he may have the energy savings wrong, and here's why I'm concerned about the warranty. And with that looks good to me, except for these things. And here's why we're better. Here's why I think we're
somebody
better
could see us all. This feels like the difference between Canadian foreign policy and American foreign policy. We're more bellicose. We're not that cool about stuff, man. That's not. I'm like, I love what you're saying, but I'm a little surprised because I guess I don't hear that as often. I love it, actually. Maybe that's why people are always talking about moving to Canada. I
don't think it's a Canadian American thing. I think it's a humility thing. I think when people are deep in the ego space, and when they're in that, I think anybody that's trying to say that they're better than somebody else, as soon as you go there, whether in a personal extent or a corporate sense, you're telling somebody that you don't feel that way actually for real. If you're saying go ahead.
Well, okay. Let's talk about. We're kind of changing trajectory, but this is where
Sure.
I love this. How does that apply to all the publicly traded lighting companies?
Well, you know what? Changing your name is like cutting off your head. How's that?
Right.
Okay. So if you're a company that has invented the light bulb, say, and had a relationship with Thomas Edison or George Westinghouse, or, same thing, Europe, right?
Yeah.
And then, you decide that you no longer want your name on the package. Well, I think that to me, that tells you enough. That tells you all you need to know about that company, Right. And I don't mean to be, again, this is me, podcast host. That's not me selling light bulbs in the field guy. Okay. But if you have like an agreement as to how long you're allowed to have the old name on the box, I think that tells you everything you need to know about that, right? That we are not interested in having our name on the box anymore. We don't want people to know that this is related to the royal family of some European company, right? I think it's Royal X something, this company, right? So we don't want the royal family of that company associated with that, whatever that is. I think that's enough for me. You change your name, you're cutting your head off.
No, fully agree. I think that's an excellent point. Excellent point. I've never understood it either, but your point makes sense. If you're not feeling it, it's not. If you're not proud of your product, then having your name removed from it makes sense.
Yeah. So the big three in America are now Keystone, TCP, and Satco. That's the big three.
Right.
You're talking about for bulb producers.
Yeah, those are the big three. Like they have the name of their brand on the box of the light bulbs, and they're proud to be a part of the system, and they're So I mean, I don't mean to be overtly critical, but and now we're talking about the trunk slammers and this sort of stuff. I think those guys had huge capital investments, and they got destroyed. And when you look at the trunk slammers or whatever you guys want to talk about here, the rebates and this and that and utilities, and I think maybe the utilities want to take their names off of this. And how does that web universe play itself out? Well, if we draw ourselves back and we look at who started this, the number one brand name in lighting is the DLC. That's the number one brand. Okay? That's the brand the consumer is buying. It's not Trunk Slammer X or this other one. And, the people that have made it through that have brought their brands through that are the three companies I mentioned earlier on, a minute ago. And they've brought their brands through that and survived. And the other companies that we talked about who chopped their heads off did not survive that. And so are there reasons for that? Yeah, there's lots of reasons. This is only, we're trying to keep it short here on the rebate show.
Right, we could go for a while. I got a lot of questions and thoughts there on DLC. Hold on a sec, John. And we're going to do a segment on DLC for sure. But let me ask you a question just to follow up on that DLC point that you made. Is it that DLC is the biggest name in lighting, or is DLC the biggest name in lighting because of utility rebates?
DLC is like a gatekeeper, right?
Right.
So like you're outside the fence now. You don't have DLC 5.0 premium or whatever. I talk to customers every day about lighting, and I sell them lighting. And the only thing they care about is whether or not they get a rebate. Okay?
Right. So
they don't care
whether
whose
or not they have
brand it
DLC.
is. Exactly. Especially in Ontario. And so the DLC is the most powerful brand in lighting. And I talked to Tina Halfpenny about this on a couple different occasions. I told her she's the most powerful woman in the lighting industry. And then I told her she's the most powerful person in the lighting industry. She didn't like it either time. And I think it's probably time that Tina and I had another chat, because I've been very critical of her organization. Not organization, her institution that rules the lighting industry. Her institution rules the lighting industry, but they pretend that they don't. They pretend they're just like the UL or the CSA. But really, they're the ones that are holding all the free money for everybody, right? So if you don't play ball with the DLC, then you don't get the free money. Oh, so who's in charge of who? Who's kidding who?
So,
right?
So Michael, we had a conversation. Let's keep playing this out. Let's continue to presuppose everything you're saying is on point. And I don't particularly disagree with any point you just made. I like where you're going with this.
I ain't presupposing shit. I just gave you the truth, brother.
Real talk is real talk here on get a grip on rebates. You can always count on.
Yeah.
Not presupposing nothing. You heard it here first. Here's the follow-up question. Okay, here's the follow-up question. We had a comment come in from a listener who said, listen, the utilities, they control the purse strings. They should be policing this more. Okay. You just made the point. Look, this ain't about the utilities. They may control those purse strings on a project level, but they're just signing up for the DLC and sort of, if you will, abdicating responsibility.
Yes.
The same way. And then on the other hand, DLC isn't assuming the responsibility. To your point, they are ostensibly assuming it because the utilities are passing it to them. But they are sort of taking this like, hey, look, we're up in the ivory tower. We're setting these specs the best we can to create a level playing field. Okay. So here's where I'm going with this. The biggest criticism that I hear from manufacturers, like our last guest, although I haven't heard this directly from him, but the smaller mid-sized manufacturers, let's call them that, actually from all of them, they oftentimes will say, well, the cheap crap still gets onto DLC. So they're not actually setting. So the comment we got from our previous listener was the utilities need to drive the wedge, and they're the ones that should be less agnostic and should, they could correct this problem. But it sounds like if I'm following not your pretense, but your gospel, my friend, because here we are, right? You're talking about DLC. They've got all this power. It reminds me of Khrushchev. He said, every time I want to make the West squeal, I just squeeze Berlin, right? He had the power. He knew. He didn't say, I don't have to go to nuclear war with them. I don't have to do all this other crazy stuff. I just drive the lever here. It's a simple thing. I squeeze Berlin. I get them to fall in line. You're talking about they have this power, but because they don't acknowledge it, it creates this disconnect, this chasm, and everybody's pointing fingers at each other and saying who should do what. What's your response to this? How do we take this to the DLC?
This is why the DLC was created in the first place. Okay? So if you look at why they started somewhere in New England or something like that, I can't remember all the history of it, but they started because the utilities were scrambling to try to figure out whether or not they were delivering quality lighting to people. Right? Exactly. So they wanted to incent it, but they were worried. It started with CEE. They had the CEE list. Remember the old... with the ballast and the tubes and all that sort of stuff, a consortium for energy efficiency. And then the DLC heist came along. And they said, don't worry about it. We'll create all the standards. Okay. And, here we are today. And so what happened at the end of the day was the utilities got to remove the liability, pass it over to the DLC that didn't take it. And now the consumer is screwed. That's what happened. Period.
Because when the buck gets passed, that's the consumer ends up with it.
Right. And so the DLC destroyed all lighting brands. That's what happened. They destroyed all the lighting brands. They said, okay, you brands have to conform to these principles. And as long as you conform to these principles, then you're allowed to get rebates, right? So all the brands. So what happened was anything in the consumer no longer had to differentiate. The DLC stamp of approval, which generated massive rebates, eliminated all brand differentiation in the market. That's what happened. Period. It's not a speculation. It's not a presupposition. Nothing. That is what happened. And that's why we lost the big three who had massive capital investments in the industry because they couldn't move. Some of them refused to move. They refused to make products that flickered. Right? There's a massive health problem out there created by okay, I'll just say it. There are several problems that were created by the DLC's qualified products list. Okay? The first one is people are suffering from bypass LED tubes that flicker. Okay? So anything prior to 2020 that was a bypass LED tube is flickering. Now, not the way that the T12s flicker, because T12s would flicker to 30 or 40%, but to 100%. So, I mean, off and on, not the mercury vapor, filament, mixed filament is cooling down and warming up. We're talking full on off.
Yeah.
Right? It's disgusting. If you look at the videos, it's gross. This is causing all manner of problems. Then we have, not only that, but we have fully uniform LED streetlights that are flickering, okay? That are flickering on and off, and creating massively uniform light, which is killing animals and wildlife and causing all manner of light trespass and probably carcinogenic. Okay? This all, in my opinion, is because of the DLC. Because nobody would have made lights like that. No lighting company would ever have made lights like that if it wasn't a race to the bottom of the qualified products list. It was a race to the bottom, not to the top. How you like that?
Unexpected, but appreciate the honesty and the gospel according to Mike. We've gone long. Love to continue the conversation. John, you have any response to Mike before we call it a show?
Man, I got so many responses, but you know what? For the sake of our listeners, I think I'm going to ruminate on them and condense them down to the Cliff Notes version so they don't have to suffer through my long form responses.
How about a story
But I am
about
gonna say-
Khrushchev to close off from me?
Can you paraphrase it? I mean, the
I'll make
best
it-
Khrushchev ones are. You don't have to, because that's
Okay.
how. Go ahead.
So
Okay.
Khrushchev was on the stage, and somebody screamed from the based on, they were talking about Stalin's horrors, and somebody screamed from the crowd saying, "How come you didn't tell Stalin to stop?" And Khrushchev said, "Who said that?" And there was silence in the room. And he said, "That's why."
There you go. There you go. Well,
Pretty
Mike,
potent. Pretty
love
potent.
it. We went from Trunk Slammers to DLC to Khrushchev, all the way back. Mike, it's always a pleasure having you on the show. John, thanks for getting the party started. To all our listeners out there, remember to go to tcpi.com. Check out our friends at TCP. And we'll see you next time on Get a Grip on Rebates. I'm Juan Carlos. That's Mike. And that's John Wilson. See you later.